welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and I'm wanting to wish everybody a Happy New Year to begin with. My guest today is Bill Kuwik. He hasn't been on Fresh Perspectives for approximately a year, but I have him on today. And we're going to talk about, well, to begin with, Happy New Year, Bill.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah,
Happy New Year,
and so anyways, well, to begin with, it wasn't easy getting here today, was it, Bill?
Everything's coated with ice.
Yeah, I know. It's that icy, we're doing this episode on that icy Saturday right after Christmas, and but anyway, Bill is going to be talking with us about how growing your own food is the real revolution. Easy crops like beans, corn, squash, potatoes, and so forth. Well, thank you for coming on to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. This snowy Monday, I didn't have anything else to do. But
yeah, you couldn't do any gardening today, could
no,
you?
maybe a little indoors. But yeah, I just think, we all talk about, our revolution in our world today. But, really, the way that, food is today, that the way we get it at the stores, there's so much, even the organic foods I'm finding out are sprayed with anti-sprouting agents and things that'll keep them from rotting so quickly too. So, the more we can grow ourselves, I think the healthier we're going to be, and obviously saves money too. But yeah, like you were saying, some of the basic ones. Corn. You can do a lot with corn after it's dried. You can eat it as sweet corn, but you can make cornmeal and use it for corn flour and stuff like that too. But beans are actually relatively easy to grow too for storage, like dried beans. And I know we talked earlier that you've done it, and but some people say about the time, how do you process them? But it's not like you have to pick a green bean while it's at a certain stage when you're growing them for dried beans. You just let them grow to maturity, and you can leave them right on the plant. And I've actually had it where I'm kind of in a crunch for time, and I've gone out with loppers and just cut the whole plant off and put them in a contractor garbage bag and just let them even dry even further like that. And I know it seems kind of complicated too, but I don't know how you processed yours, but I just put them in a grain sack and just whack the sack with a stick, and the beans release from the pods, and then you remove the plant material, and all you have to do is just dump that into a barrel of water, and all the sticks and stuff float to the top, the beans sink to the bottom, and then you just have to spread them out on cookie sheets or whatever to let them completely dry. Mm-hmm. And after they're really good and dry, then you just put them in jars. And I've kept my own beans for even more than a year that way. And you can do the same with corn. And I know there's they have the crank machine that takes the kernels off, but I was growing the corn for a Peruvian beer that I was making. And
a Peruvian beer?
Chicha. It's the
Chicha?
corn beer of the Andes. But if you just take 2 ears of dry corn and just rub the ears together, the kernels will drop off. But yeah, you have to sprout the kernels to make the beer. But yeah, so it's not really that complicated. I know if you've never done it, it seems a little bit I don't know, more difficult. But it's really not that hard to do that. And like you said too earlier, potatoes and even sweet potatoes are good. I've had my difficulties with voles and sweet potatoes, but field mice. But the field mice will eat my potatoes too. And this year probably better than last year's garden. But I think I told you I have so many deer problems around me. But I did a little bit more with fencing this year, and I knew I needed to do more. And this year I'm looking into more intense fencing to keep the deer out, because I think I mentioned I have Jerusalem artichokes, which is another thing that easy to grow and something that you can eat all winter long. But again, you have to keep the deer out of them here.
Yeah.
I have 3 rows of 35 in a bed, so a little over 100 plants, and they usually produce like 15 to 25 pounds. So if you average 20 pounds per 100 plants, I mean that's a ton of Jerusalem artichokes. But I've seen where it was a Friday morning, the deer started to, I didn't realize they would dig to get to the tubers, but they dug up a few, and I had my friend Sean come in to help me on Sunday, so I said, we're going to have to dig some of these up before they eat them all. Well, from Friday night to Saturday, they had eaten more. By the time he came on Sunday, all gone. So in 3 nights, I lost a ton of Jerusalem artichokes. But I think, too, though, what I usually did in the past when I had them was just, if you just lay hay bales or straw bales over the top of the bed, it keeps them from freezing. So if you had a day like today and you wanted some Jerusalem artichokes, you just go and tip over a bale and take your fork out and dig some of them up. But yeah, potatoes, I mean, we know we have to hill them to get a bigger crop and keep them from getting green. But I mean, when you think, like, I don't know about you, but if I would think a normal family, it wouldn't be that hard to raise 200 pounds of potatoes. I one time had really, really nice compost in the corner of my bed. I have a lot of oak trees around my property, so I just used the bagger in the fall, and I just kept picking up all the leaves and dumping them over that fence. And come spring, I thought, boy, all those oak leaves broken down, it's really, really nice compost in there. And what could I plant in that would be really good? And I remember they were red Pontiac seed potato, and I had 10. Only 6 of them made it, but one plant would, it 2/3 of the way filled a 5-gallon bucket. So having 6 of those gave me, like, what would it be? If 2/3 of a bucket per plant, 6 would be 12/3. So I guess I had 4 buckets fulls. And I would have to imagine that's probably close to 100 pounds of potatoes in 4 or 5-gallon buckets filled to the top. And I mean, it was a very small area. I mean, it's 6 plants essentially. So, if you have good soil and you take care of them, and that's the thing too. I always want to say too about, I want to say we should be all doing this sustainably, but sometimes for mulch, I mean, I'll just leave part of a field that I mow sometimes. I'll let it grow a little bit longer and then just cut those grasses and pile it up and make compost with that. But and I know earlier I was telling him I used to get free hay from a friend of mine who had horses, and sometimes the hay wasn't any good, and I would just pile it up and mix it with compost and let it sit for a year and have like huge compost piles from that. But and again too, to maintain and improve our soils. I don't know if you ever use cover crops or Carl ever plants anything like that.
No, not really, but it sounds pretty interesting.
Well, one thing I've done is just kind of like an understory is just like plant, it's Alsike clover. It's a low-growing clover. And I plant the whole bed in clover earlier in the spring. And then I planted my tomatoes and my basil in that bed. So you just dig a hole or make an area where the tomato plant's going to be, and eventually the clover grows right up against the roots or right up against the stalk anyway. So it keeps the weeds down, it shades your soil, and it's constantly producing nitrogen. Every like maybe month, I would just go through it by hand. I would just like pull off the excess, like cut it down so it wasn't growing up so high. But things like that. And I know like Elliot Coleman would plant as an understory between every 2 rows of corn, he would plant 5 rows of soybeans. And the soybeans just fill everything. And you wait for the corn to get about 8 to 10 inches tall, and then you plant the soybeans. So the corn's a little bit ahead of the soybeans, but you don't get any weeds growing in between your rows like that too. But then too, like just sometimes with at the end of the season, you pull out a crop and you're kind of done, and you're like, well, I don't really have anything else I want to plant in here. Buckwheat, if you just plant buckwheat seed in there, it grows really, really fast. It has big broad leaves, chokes out the weeds, and I've read they say if you plant buckwheat in succession, like two 2 successions in a row, it really improves the soil. Just like the anything will grow really, really well in it after a couple successions of buckwheat. And I know I was telling you earlier before the show that in my, what I call my middle garden now, I planted cover crops for 2 full years before I ever planted anything there. I mean, I had another garden going, but yeah, it was, I think I said it was the soybeans the first summer, and then I made up my own fall-winter mix of winter rye, peas, and clover, and I got it in early enough that I probably had a foot or more of growth before the cold weather came, but by April 30th the next year, the peas died over the winter, but the clover and the winter rye was waist high on April 30th of the next year, and so ground that up, and when it was warm enough to plant buckwheat until it went to seed, chopped it, ground it in again, and those seeds regerminated. So I did 2 successions of buckwheat and winter rye again for the winter, and then the next spring started planting in that area.
Well, I wanted to kind of get back to growing the beans for dried beans.
Right.
I wanted to mention that how we did that was, well, Carl would plant them, but then I would do a lot of, I would pick them when they were, all dried.
Right.
Like in September and like that, and take them all out of the shells, spend a bunch of time taking them out of the shells, and then we dry them in the food dehydrator for about a day. And
so you did it by hand, then you removed them?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Never thought that there was an easier way. Yeah, it would take a long, long time, yeah. But it's, when you did it the way you were describing, it manages to stay separate from the
well, when
husk?
you put the whole plant, I mean, I would cut the roots off so you didn't get the dirt in there, but I would take the whole plant with the bean pods in it into like a nylon grain sack and just whack it with a stick, and then if you pulled it out and you could see one of them didn't open, you could just hit it by hand. But you would get like some sticks and some parts of the pods in with the beans, but when you pour that into water, the beans are heavy and they'll sink, and all the other stuff floats to the top, so you just skim that off and then just dry your beans off after they're clean. But yeah, it's pretty simple, really. I mean, I would use like because I was doing a lot, I would do like, a half of a 55-gallon drum of water and then pour it into that. But I think maybe I have gone through and picked beans, just sort of smashed them up. But yeah, that process of just putting them in water is really simple. So that, like I said, anything that's lighter floats to the top. You could even just pour it off of a bucket or something like that. But the beans always go to the bottom, and then I just pour them through a sieve, and then usually spread them out on either wax paper or, like I said, big cookie sheets, depending on how much you have. But yeah, with the corn too, similarly. Like I said, I have a big, I think it's a 3-gallon like stainless mixing bowl, and I would just sit on a chair and just rub those 2 ears together, and all the corn kernels would drop off of them.
Yeah, you do have to rinse things, though, don't you? I mean, the beans would be dirtier than the ones you get in the store.
Well, yeah, but I already rinsed them to get the other stuff off them,
yeah.
so they're already clean that way. But yeah, I always separate the dirt too before I it's like the same with, like, I don't know about you, but like I have hoses outside, so if I pick root crops, beets or something like that, I always hose them off outdoors before I bring them into the kitchen, so I don't have to deal with all that mud going down my kitchen sink.
Oh yeah, you don't want to plug it up, do you?
Right, but. So yeah, I mean, potatoes we know are fairly easy to grow. We know they store fairly well. I know I was told by someone once, they told me that you can't grow your own potatoes because you get Solanaceae poisoning. And I'm like, I've grown
Solanaceae poisoning.
Right. Well, the nightshade family is Solanaceae, so tomatoes,
yeah.
potatoes, but you can get like arthritic symptoms from
because
eating.
they have the same poison in them as the deadly nightshade
Right,
plant.
right. But I don't know what she did, but I think she must have picked her potatoes and left them on the soil for a while. Or maybe she didn't hill them enough and they were green. But I mean, I used to cut away a green part of a potato, but I've read now they say you really shouldn't, because they say even though it's green here, the toxins go through the whole potato. So if I find a green one that I grew, I'll just set that aside for next year's planting. But I might have told this story before, but I read a book on a guy. He was an Amish guy. He was in Peru, and Peru is where a lot of potatoes come from originally, but they don't hill their potatoes, but what they do, they process them differently. They don't just boil them and make mashed potatoes like we would. They actually boil the potatoes, cook them for a long time so it brings out that poison. They remove the water, they mash the potatoes and put it on, again, like wax paper, and then it dries, so that processing takes away a lot of the toxicity, and then they use the potato flour in different dishes. Well, this Amish guy was down in Peru, and he was just going to the market and buying the potatoes and cooking them up, and within weeks he had such severe rheumatoid arthritis symptoms. He went to a hospital, and they're like, yeah, I mean, all we can tell you is take about 25 or 30 aspirins a day, because you have severe rheumatoid arthritis. He says, this is crazy. I had no symptoms up until just now. And he came back to the States and went to a hospital, and they told him the same thing. But he said, I just knew. He said, I just knew that there had to be something. And he talked to a homeopath, and he took some homeopathic remedies and a lot of, like, I want to say carrot juice and beet juice, things to like cleanse his system. And he said it took a couple of months, but he did recover from it. But
he did get better.
But yeah, I think that's what happened to her, though.
Well,
somehow she was either not hilling the potatoes or she was eating green potatoes or something. Because I mean, you've probably grown your own. I've grown mine. I've sold potatoes to restaurants, and nobody got solanaceae poisoning for my potatoes.
Well, yeah, I have heard that there's concentrated amounts of it on the parts of the potato that is green, but anyways, when Carl and I were first together, and we were, he was teaching me how to bake bread. I remember that the recipes we were using called for the water that potatoes had been cooked in. And it has always made really nice bread.
Yep.
So, instead of just plain water.
Right, right. Well, and I don't know about you too, but like with corn, I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's good to, have your own dried corn kernels, but I myself, I'll grow my own corn, cook it, and then just take the fresh cooked sweet kernels off and just put them in quart Ziploc bags, freezer bags, and freeze those. But I did this year actually have a decent tomato crop, because I probably mentioned last year I had probably my worst tomato crop ever, and it was just the deer were eating the plants. My cages are 5 feet tall, and usually by the end, people laugh at me like, "Whoa, what do you have, big tall tomato cages?" It's like, you come to my house at the end of July, and they'll be out of the top of the cages, and then by the end of September, they'll grow all the way back to the ground. So I have actually, on a couple of occasions for a cherry tomato plant, doubled up the cage, and so I had a 9.5 foot tall tomato cage, and you have to be up on a step ladder to pick them at the end of the season. But this year, what I ended up doing was, where I have my row of tomato cages, I took like the real fine mesh, like the bird netting, and I clothespined it to the first cage, took it all the way down, brought it around the other side. So it wasn't really like a fence around it, but they couldn't get their heads through the mesh to get to my tomato plants. So I definitely had a better season. I think last year, out of 35 plants, I think I ended up with 2 jars of sauce was all I got. But this year I got a decent amount. But yeah, so I think corn is versatile, beans are versatile, potatoes too, and then I think I was kind of surprised looking at a video. They considered onions one of their #1 storage crops, and I have for years. I used to buy thousands of plants from the one company, and friends would buy from me. So if you wanted to buy a bundle of 100, it would probably run you like $16. But if I bought 5,000 onion starts, I could sell you that same bundle for $3, through me. So,
yeah.
but that way I would get mine a lot cheaper than everyone else. But kind of a funny story, when I started massage school, I was thinking, I'll farm a little bit and do some massage, and then I was like, even part-time farming is a full-time job. I'm not going to do it. So I started canceling all my orders and came home from school on the last day of massage school, and there was 8 boxes by my door. I'm like, I didn't cancel the onion order. I had 8,000 onion plants, and no intention of growing anything that year. But thankfully, I think Ed Waxham bought about 2,500 from me, so I only had.
Well, I have a little bit of a funny story. You were talking about, let me think, what was it? Buckwheat. Well, anyways. We had honeybees for a long time, not a lot, not enough for a business, but we had a few hives. Mm-hmm. And when we were extracting the honey from the spring and early summer honey flow, normally it was always very light colored. Mm-hmm. And we hadn't noticed the bees on that particular year. We had not noticed the bees on the, what are those trees that get really tall?
Locust?
Oh yeah, locust trees. We hadn't been noticing them on the locust trees as usual, and we're extracting the honey, and filtering it and like that, and we're noticing that it was a dark brown color that year, and we couldn't figure out why. I'm going, if I didn't know better, I'd swear that was buckwheat honey, because of the color. Well, later on in the summer, somebody who lives about a mile from us, up around the corner from us, told me that they had planted buckwheat in their field that year, and they said when the buckwheat was blooming, it was completely covered with honeybees. And I'm going, so that's where they were going.
It's a funny thing, though. I remember I planted buckwheat when I lived on Creek Road, and I had this whole, big patch of it. And they said, the honeybees, you'll just love it. And it was all in flower, and I stood there and stood there and stood there. I'm like, there isn't one bee on any of this at all. And I saw a fly at one point. I'm like, well, it's not me that I'm not seeing bugs, mm-hmm. but they weren't there. But I read somewhere that I think it's a certain type of Japanese buckwheat that the bees aren't attracted to it at all. So I'm thinking maybe that's what I grew. Because here I'm going, I have this whole field of all these buckwheat flowers, and there's not one bee on any of them.
That must have been it.
Right. But yeah, so things like those, like we said, the corn, the bean, even squash, I think is a really good,
Are you talking about the winter squash?
Yeah, like a winter storage squash. Yeah. Even spaghetti squash is in that. I do like the delicata, which actually can be eaten sooner. Usually don't keep as long, but butternut, acorn. I do like. It's a orange kubocha. It's a Johnny selected seed. I want to say sunshine it's called, but they're kind of flat, round, but sort of flatter, big thick stalk on those things. But man, those, you can bake those things and put nothing on them, and they taste like you have sugar on them. And I've had those keep like well into March of the next year. Really well, but then again, too, like I said, onions are obviously, to me, kind of a staple. Anytime you cook, you need an onion or two.
Certain famous doctors who've done a lot of research say that onions are one of the main, cancer prevention foods. I think they call it G-bombs, greens. They go greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, let's see, something else, and I think it's berries. There's berries too, that are, the best anti-cancer foods. But you were also mentioning clover.
Right.
Also, and according to the natural healers who do natural alternative therapies, that the red clover is one of the blood purifying.
It's supposed to make your hair grow too.
Does it really? But like
fake news.
Like the Hoxie natural cancer therapy people, they would have their patients take a mixture of all the blood purifying herbs. There'd be the red clover, the burdock, and...
Well, speaking of such, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on here, but I went to a naturopath food healer back in the late 80s in Ohio, and before he gave me anything, he said, try this if you want to. He said, you can do this every day or, a few times a week, but he called it a blood purifier and a blood builder, but he called it the 5 leaves drinks. But he said five leaves of endive, 5 leaves of escarole, 5 leaves of spinach, and then he just said like handfuls of fresh parsley. And he says if you don't have a juicer where you can actually just extract the juice, he said just use like 8 ounces of spring water and put it in your blender. And he said try to drink that every day. And I had a friend out in Ohio, and he wasn't really the healthiest guy. He was an artist and worked at a pizza place. I think he ate pizza pretty much like every day. And I didn't tell him, hey, you should try this, but I didn't see him for a couple months. He went back home, and he came back, and he's like, hey, Bill, look, you think I look different? I'm like, he just had so much more color in his face. And I knew he hadn't been in the South or anything to get a tan. I'm like, you definitely look different. But he's like, yeah, you remember that drink you told me about? I'm like, I told you what? And he said, yeah, the 5 leaves thing. He said, man, I've been doing it every day. And he said he felt like so much better, and he looked better. I mean, it really, like, I think, all that green stuff, all that chlorophyll helped him to get more oxygen in his blood, and it really made a big difference for him. So the 5 leaves. Yeah,
I don't think I'd heard that before, but I think like licorice was one of the other blood purifiers. There was several.
I do know men have to be careful with licorice because it actually will lower your testosterone levels.
Oh, I also heard that you can overdose on, if you eat too much licorice candy, you can overdose on it.
Makes sense, yep.
So, but if you're drinking it like as a tea, I don't know, it's probably not as...
Yeah, well, you wouldn't probably ingest that much. I mean, when you're eating the sugary candy with licorice, you could probably overdo it more than the tea.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But yeah, like garlic, again, too. I mean, it's not like you would eat a meal of garlic, but that's certainly something that's a storable product that you could grow your own. I always grow, I mean, actually, this last year, I don't know if you remember how wet it was in the spring, but I know one of the Buffalo weather guys said it was like the wettest spring that we had since 1967. I know.
Oh, this year's spring.
Yeah, 2025. Yeah, and I want to say wettest May and the wettest spring. And the one client of mine told me, he said, yeah, this is the wettest spring since 1967. He said the year that I graduated from high school. Not me, he. But yeah, so where it was I think it had to do with I got 5 dump truck loads of compost delivered, and my garlic bed was here, and all the compost was like piled up here. And I think because it was hills, the rain and snow melt just flowed off of those, so it made my garlic bed really wet. I had a row of shallots on the southernmost edge, and then I grew my Korean red garlic, my Spanish roja, and then my music pink is the tallest, so I always put that on the north of all the other varieties. And in the spring I had about 18 of those shallots came up, and I went through and I made sure that they could get sun. But this ended up here, and over here was like a pond. I never had water standing there ever in like 17 years, and every time I'd go down there, it was like the water's just standing there. And it was just too wet for the garlic. Usually garlic does better in a wetter season, but there's a limit to what it can take too.
Yeah, I remember back in the spring, it rained almost every day. It would rain for like 4 or 5 days in a row, and then you get 1 or 2 sunny days, and then it would go back to raining
I know
again.
myself. I remember it was on Memorial Day. I had my tractor running. I'm like, it's finally dry enough that I can start preparing the soil, because it was just too wet before Memorial Day. So literally on Memorial Day, I was working up the soil. Usually, I'm like, if I'm going to plant on or before Memorial Day, I've had the soil worked up for weeks in advance, and I just couldn't get on it. It was just too wet, too muddy down there. But in addition to we did mention the squash, but pumpkins are another fairly easy thing to grow and highly nutritious, and they store fairly well too. I make a spicy pumpkin soup, and I do like the New England pie pumpkins, but I'm not much of a baker, so I don't really make pies. But I know the one year though, I had a problem with the cucumber beetles getting into the squash family, and the one year it was all compost. It was old. I think I had 5 30-yard dumpsters of compost dumped in this area, and I was taking it away. And I thought, this is all really nice soil underneath that. So, I'm going to plant squash and pumpkins in there, and came up looking beautiful. And in about 2 weeks, the cucumber beetles just decimated me. But the one thing that's super easy to control those, I don't know if you have that problem, but right as soon as you plant them, put the row cover over the top, because then the bugs can't get through the row cover. And then after about the middle of June, you can uncover them. Or a lot of times I wait until the solstice around June 21st before I uncover. And usually if the plant's a little bit bigger and hardier, a little stronger, it won't. It will be damaged by those, but it won't. It'll still produce a crop. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I've had people tell me that something about, I think it's marigolds.
Oh yeah.
Planting marigolds between the crops that the cucumber beetles go after.
Yeah, and it's actually too for the nematodes that will affect your the root crops, like your carrots and beets and stuff like that. I've read that if you take let's say you're going to grow carrots in a bed, the year before, plant it all into marigolds. Just let marigolds grow in it, and then just
really?
row till then.
And then the next year plant your carrots?
Plant your carrots in that the next year, because they say the marigolds will kill all the root rot nematodes that will be in the ground. And they say one marigold plant will affect a 3-foot diameter circle around it. But I know one year I went to this guy up in Buffalo. He's some researcher at Roswell, but he's a plant heirloom plant like breeder, and he had these. I want to say they were marigolds, and they were called like Johnny Jester or something like that. And
well, there's some sort of a flower that they call Johnny Jump Ups or something.
Right. Well, these things grew like, I've never seen a marigold. Usually marigolds were, maybe about like this. These things were like 5 feet tall. They were just these huge marigold plants. I didn't know that anything would grow that big, or a marigold would grow that big. But you would think that would have a lot more effect around the ground if you had that much more material going in. But yeah, oftentimes I'll plant marigolds like at the ends of all my beds and interspersed, throughout my plantings too. But I think it does help to repel some animals too. But now, did you have deer problems this year?
Oh gosh, they kind of like to take over. They will come around and. If you have some old apple trees, when they get ripe, and the ones that fall on the ground, they'll come around and eat the apples.
Well, I have 5 apple trees that I planted, and I've been taking really good care of them the last 6 or 7 years, trimming them. I weed whack all the weeds down. I usually will put compost down, but even just as a weed barrier, I'll put cardboard down and put 1 bale of hay. Elliot Cullen told us that some agricultural engineers at University of Amherst in Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts in Amherst, found that they put a bale of straw in like a stainless steel tray, and they collected everything that leached through it, and they found that 1 bale of hay has all the nutrients that 1 fruit tree needs for a season. So if I don't put compost down, which often I do, I put the cardboard down, and I'll put a bale of straw or hay underneath each of my apple trees, and I trim them, and they were all looking really, really good. They were loaded. I mean, 5 trees were just loaded, and I was out on my mower one day, and I looked like, what? The deer, I mean, this was in the middle of July. The apples were like half grown. They weren't up to size yet, and they ate them all. I mean, way up at the top of the tree, I think out of 5 trees, I might have gotten 25 apples, so maybe 5 apples per tree. So they definitely don't wait for them to fall to the ground all the time.
Oh,
I mean,
gosh.
Anything that they could reach.
Are they not full-grown trees? Are they?
I have the front row is dwarf, and no, front row is semi-dwarf. The back row is dwarf. So they're smaller trees. But I mean, I would have had probably 12 or 1,500 apples, but they ate everything.
Okay.
Even blueberries. I mean, I'd seen some damage in the past, but I have 6 really nice, big bushes, and I was going out there for a couple weeks. I'd go out and I'd pick like a handful or 2 while I was out with my dogs, and one day I was like picking over here, and I looked over at the next bush, and I'm like, there was clusters of berries like all over that bush just like yesterday. And I went over, and you could see where there's berries all over the ground. They're just grabbing and eating like whole clusters of the green fruit.
Oh, the green berries.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a few ripe ones in there, but they're just...
Before they're even ripe.
Yeah, they eat my asparagus, but my dogs eat the asparagus too. I have to keep them out of it. I know one day I was planting my pear trees, and a guy was helping me, and I had a decent amount. I was able to keep the deer and the dogs out of it, and wasn't paying attention. The dogs were in there. They ate it all. I had to put mesh on top of my potatoes because 2 years ago, the 2024 season, I learned with potatoes that if you want a fall crop, to wait until about the 4th of July or the week after the 4th of July to plant, so then they're ready in October when you're digging them in October. I used to plant them in May, and then they'd be ready in August, and then you got to figure out how to store them. But so I like to have some earlier potatoes, like for late summer or early fall. So I'll plant 1 or 2 rows, a small crop for earlier potatoes, and I plant my main crop for later. Well, in the spot where I planted the early ones, they came up, they were about this big, and I was just about ready to hill them, and I went out, and I think it was deer, but something ate almost all the shoots. There was still some leaves, so I still kind of hilled them up. They grew some more. They ate them again. I got nothing out of it. The other patch, I want to say it was 4 or 5 rows that I had there, and I know it was deer, but as soon as they came up, they just ate everything. They just ate them right down. So I had beautiful seed potato that I had been keeping from like the last couple seasons. I had Kennebec for a white potato. I had this one kind of pink skinned, I think it was yellow flesh potato that I just got from a bag from Wegmans. And then professor from Fredonia gave me these, they were all blue, like the blue skin, blue fleshed potatoes. And from the 2023 season, they say to plant a potato about the size of a hen's egg. Well, I had like a bag full of all these potatoes that I had saved from the year before, and something ate all my plants, so I had to buy new stock this year. So, but again, they were starting to eat everything. I experimented because I thought, maybe, I don't know if you've ever heard people plant in a big container. Well, I have these I guess I did it in a 10-gallon pot, but it seemed, oh no, I had a bigger, I don't even know what it was, maybe like a 40, maybe like a 30-gallon pot. And so I just put some really nice compost in it, and then I put one potato, like 4 potatoes, like one in each corner, let's say. And then as it grew up, I just kept putting straw inside there, kept watering and fertilizing. They grew up out of there. I got potatoes. It really wasn't that great. There was a fair amount. They weren't, really, really big ones. But where I planted out in the garden, I ended up using a bird mesh. I just stretched it out, and I put like a sandbag at each corner just to be over the top, and actually where the vine would grow through. And it's funny because, a potato plant, a tomato plant, a pepper, eggplant, those again are Solanaceae. They're in the deadly nightshade family. Deer shouldn't like to eat those things. I'm sure it makes them not feel well after they've eaten a poisonous plant. But I think the thing is though, like where I live, there's so many deer that, if you had one deer come up and eat a couple of tips and it didn't feel good, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I was thinking about those Jerusalem artichokes. It's like 2,000 pounds in 3 nights. That's not like 4 or 5 deer eating that. It's got to be like close to 40 deer to eat that much.
Well, they say that there's a big overpopulation of deer.
Absolutely. I was just looking at a graph today. There are more deer in the United States than there ever has been. Since, before white people came here. So.
Yeah, before the white people came. Yeah, I heard that many years ago when people started wanting to use, raise cattle and like that, they kind of killed off a lot of the wolves that were around, and the wolves were the ones that kept the deer population under control.
Yeah.
That's what happens when people mess with Mother Nature.
I was just reading there, they said for, 50 years in Vermont that they would give you a bounty if you brought in a porcupine, or that you killed porcupines. Porcupine? But they said the thing was it was the fisher. The fisher cats used to kill the porcupines, but they killed off all the fisher cats. So the control for the porcupines was the fisher cats. You kill the fisher cats, and now you have an overpopulation of porcupine.
I've heard that the fisher cats have been making a big comeback.
I haven't seen one yet, but I have friends that have seen them. I don't know if you ever go into Point Gratiot in Dunkirk, but I have one friend who lives like right off of the point there, and he said that he was out with his dog, and his neighbor has a garden. And he said he saw something in the garden. He said, I swear there was a fisher cat in this guy's garden. And then one of my neighbors, not far from me, Seymour Street's about 2/10 of a mile from that, and he's definitely maybe like another 10th, so a little over a quarter of a mile from me. And he said, and I know some friends of mine more in Forestville were having problems with fishers were getting into their chickens and killing the chickens. A guy down the road from me said that he saw a mated pair. I think this was in the spring of 2024, he said. And he said, I tried to follow them. He said, but they're so smart. And he said, they're so fast. And I said, was that up behind your place? He said, yeah. So, if they were a quarter mile from me at his house, they're probably around me too.
There was some sort of an animal, oh gosh, must have been half a dozen or more years ago, came and I heard something running back and forth. On the wood siding of our house. And I went to take a closer look to see if I could figure out what was going on. And this black animal came up and looked in the window at me. We've been kind of wondering ever since if it was one of those.
They usually tend to stay away from people, but I wouldn't say it would be impossible. That they wouldn't. I remember when I used to live at by the log home that I used to rent, where there was snow on the sill plate of the sliding patio door, and coyote footprints were on that sill plate, like they were looking in my patio window.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I've heard that they're around. And then we saw some other mysterious, after that one visitation, if you want to call it that. I remember there was, we saw some weird tracks around in the snow that winter. Like, they'd appear to show up in one place in the snow, and end at another place in the snow. And we were wondering if it was something that could climb pretty good, you know, to get up out of the snow, because you just don't see tracks starting and then a row of them and then stopping.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, they can climb. I've heard, I don't know, you know, sometimes you hear stuff that it just seems like we like to demonize any of the predators. You know, I've heard people saying that with the coyotes, my one client's like, there's no deer left. The deer are all gone. He says, you know what? He said, the coyotes, they can smell when the female is about to have their baby, and they just track them. And as soon as the babies drop, they just eat them right up.
They eat the babies.
Yeah, and I'm like, but there was 18 deer in my backyard yesterday. He's saying the deer are all gone because of the coyotes. But
well, you know, we've been noticing that the deer, a lot of the deer are having twins.
Yeah.
In recent years.
Yep. Yep. Well, milder winters generally. I mean, last winter we had a real winter, but yeah. But the one thing I have heard about the fisher cats, they're like, oh, they're so nasty. They say they'll climb a tree and they will kill a turkey like right on the roost. So they don't even wait for them to fly down. That's why there's no turkeys left. It's like, well,
yeah,
but you still see turkeys.
I've heard that they're the one animal that can kill a porcupine.
Yep. Yeah, they will. Yep. But so I don't know. You know, again, they're here. They are supposedly making a comeback. I don't have chickens, so I haven't had any problems with that. But you know, and the other thing too, though, like we were talking about apple trees. I mean, that's like another thing that if you have a little bit of land, you could plant an apple tree, and that's certainly a sustainable thing. It doesn't take a whole lot to maintain. I mean, you do have to trim them every year, but again, something you don't have to go to the store to buy, and they keep for months and months. And I mean, I guess people make applesauce and can it and stuff like that too. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that, I mean, the way things are going with more and more chemicals in all of our food products, that the more you can grow, the healthier you're going to be, and it obviously saves you money too.
Yeah, but right now, grocery prices are the highest they've probably ever been.
Right.
Right now, I mean, you can't have a conversation with anybody in the grocery store without hearing them complaining that the food is so expensive these days.
Yep. I know I was at the Lexington Natural Foods Co-op on Monday, and I had a grocery bag with about this much stuff in it, and it was like $110.
For just one little bag?
Yeah, yeah. And the lady behind me said, that's a lot for that much. I'm like, I know, but, you know, what am I going to do? Well, I mean, you know, you get a 1 pound jar of organic almond butter, it's $20. So if you had 5 of those jars, there's $100 there. That wouldn't even fill the bottom of the bag. Not that I buy 5 jars of it. I'm just saying that, you know, kind of a couple of more expensive items like that adds up. But, you know, I mean, I grow mushrooms, but I also, you know, this time of year, I've got a few shiitake out there, but with these temperatures, there isn't anything else coming, so I'll buy the mushrooms. But there's that, what is it, Flat 9 or something like that in Buffalo, where they're raising them, which they're really good. They're really fresh, really good quality. So I will we'll get those.
Well, another thing that people can do for themselves is, you know, you buy a packet of some sort of seeds, like broccoli seeds, and like that, the certain other kinds of seeds. You can sprout them on your kitchen.
Right. Right.
You can sprout them on your kitchen
Yeah, or just
counter.
any other things like radishes are a good
Radishes
sprouter
are a
too.
really delicious tasting sprout. If you can sprout them. I'm trying to think what else I've got at home that I sprout.
Sunflowers. So I know my friend Sean, of course, he brought me this big bag of sunflower sprouts. I had a friend coming up from Florida, and I was like, oh yeah, that'll be good. Well, he can have those in the salads. And then about 2 weeks later, I looked in the refrigerator, I'm like, oh, well, these are all slimy and rotten now. So I think I ate
Yeah.
like one handful right then. But
Well, you grow enough of this stuff that you can eat within a reasonable amount of time.
right.
And then, yeah, they will get like that if you don't eat them right up. But they're very, very good for you if
Oh, yeah.
you eat them as soon as, within a few days after they're ready.
I know I bought a little sprouting system in 2020. I thought, well, what the heck? And I bought several different seeds. In fact, I think fenugreek was one of the seeds that came with the system, but it was like these plastic trays, and then I don't know. It seemed like you would pour the water through the top, and it would just filter through each one, and then the reservoir in the bottom, and you just dump the reservoir every day.
Right. And they just fill up those trays, really, really good. Oh, lentil sprouts. That's another one that I really like to.
You would probably like this. My friend Amar from India, he made pesaratu. Take the mung bean seeds, you sprout those for a few days, and then the day before, like I usually made them for breakfast, but you take brown rice and just soak that overnight, put both the brown rice and the mung beans in your food processor, grind that up, and you make like a crepe almost. Just cook that in a little bit of oil, but you just have it with a little almond butter or peanut butter or something like that. But it's gluten free because it's just beans and rice basically. But I can't remember the ratios. It was maybe a cup of the beans to maybe a quarter cup of the rice. But the beans would sprout. You'd sprout them for a few days before you'd use them. But
yeah. I wanted to mention real quick, you were talking about the Fisher cats, but there was something on the radio that they were talking about yesterday. I think they said it was in Thailand, and it's a type of cat that they thought for many years was extinct.
Huh.
And now they've started seeing some of them.
Yeah.
And they call them flathead cats.
Oh, I think I have heard of that.
So, but they found some.
Yeah, I know. I mean, around here, my dad said that back in the 40s, he shot a deer, and he said when he went back the next day to hunt in the same place, he said, I didn't tell anybody, but he said, I swore, he said he saw a Fisher cat, because they usually have, they're kind of higher in the back and lower in the front, but he said, I figured if I tell people, they'd think I was crazy, but I know it's got to be the last 7-8 years or so I've started hearing about them, but again, I've never seen one, I've never seen any sign of them, but then sometimes at night I hear something, I'm like, what is that? I just really have no idea, but they are making a comeback. But I guess one of the reasons why they were hunted or trapped so much is they do have a really beautiful coat, so they were using them for their fur, which is what really depleted the numbers. But I think too, anytime there's any larger predator, man likes to eliminate them. So, for obvious reasons, I guess. But they do, like you said, they do control, porcupines. But and I don't know. I don't remember when I was growing up. I never heard of a coyote around here. But when I moved back here 35 years ago or so, my uncle was talking about it. I'm like, there's coyotes here. I was like, yeah, they're seen them all over the place.
I always heard of them as being kind of a Western thing,
right?
Part of the country thing. But it's my understanding, according to things that I've heard and read, was that the DEC or somebody like that brought them into the area to try to help control the deer population.
Right. I don't know as they really do affect the deer so much, because anytime I've ever seen a coyote, they're hunting like field mice or something like that. I think occasionally they will go after like a sheep or a farm animal or something like that too. But I think it's pretty rare that, I mean, you think a coyote weighs about 35 or 40 pounds. I mean, maybe if the whole pack were to eat the deer, it would,
Yeah.
they could go through it.
Maybe that's how they do it, the whole pack.
Right.
Does it together.
Well, and I know that, I don't know, I have seen things that I have to believe that I've seen a sign of like big cats when I was out in more wilder areas like Charlotte, Cherry Creek out that way. And I even actually where I used to run my dogs in Forestville, it was, I think it was Christmas morning the one time, and I had one smaller dog, Beagle mix, and I had my bigger Pit Bull Mastiff mix, and they came to a trail and they were very interested in it, but the dog weighed 100 pounds and his feet were about this big. Well, whatever this thing was a cat-like footprint, and it was about 3 times the size of my dog's foot, and it was sinking into the snow deeper than the 100-pound dog was. And that little Beagle mix, she didn't listen at all. And she got away from me, and I said, Willie, get over here. And she just looked scared, and she just came right to me. And the male, who was usually like on alert, and he was ready to hunt anything, he was like kind of like keeping his head down. He was sort of like cowering, like there's something out here that could be hunting us. And I got a kind of a funny feeling when I was there, and I started carrying a weapon with me when I walked my dogs after that. But
well, I remember coming home from, we used to go to these Beekeepers Association meetings that were held monthly, and I remember on our way home from this meeting, it was a winter night, now that I think of it, but we were on our way home from one of those meetings, and it was after dark, and I saw something over away from the side of the road, just a short distance from the road, and it looks like I'm seeing a cat, except a lot bigger than a lot bigger than a domestic cat. And I remember doing a double take. Carol was driving, and I remember turning my head really fast. And Carol goes, "What was that?"
Yeah.
I go, "I don't know, but I think it might have been a bobcat."
Yeah.
It was bigger than any domestic cat I've ever seen.
My friend and I were riding our bikes on what's called the Arab Hill Truck Trail up on the state land and Boutwell Hill Reservation, and he's not really that much of an outdoors guy, but he's like, "Man, are there like big cats out here?" I'm like, "I don't know, maybe a bobcat or something." Man, he said, "I swear there was a footprint in the mud back there. It's the size of a horse hoof." And I was like, "It was probably a horse." No. And I stopped dead in my tracks. I mean, there was a paw print that if I spread out my hand, the toes were at the tips of my fingers, and the middle pad was as big as the palm of my hand. So it was a cat that had a foot big in the mud. It wasn't like it stepped in some snow and then it melted so it looked bigger. I mean, it was in dirt and
we've
on a road.
seen some tracks on our property, not a lot, but that looked like they were big feline feet.
I mean, I have never seen a bear on my property, but I had these 2 kids that were Tibetan Buddhists helping me in 2012, and I wanted to give them some more hours. I said, "Here, take this cart that I have and just go down the creek and just pick up any trash that you see, any plastic or cans or bottles or anything like that." And then when they came back, they said, "Are there bears around here?" I'm like, "Could be." They said, "Would you recognize it from a footprint?" I said, "I might." And they showed me a footprint. I'm like, "Definitely a bear." I mean, they've been right in the village of Fredonia more than once.
We never actually saw any of them, but when we had a few beehives, every once in a while, one of the hives would be torn apart.
I noticed the one guy up there on the top of the hill on the Stockton-Hartfield Road. He has several bee things there, and I noticed he had like electric fence, like a tall electric fence around it. I was like, "Oh, for the bear."
Oh, yeah. Well, I hate to say it because we've been having fun talking about vegetables and animals here. But we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives,
Well-
and thank you so much for doing
Yeah.
today's episode
Sure.
for us.
So everybody, grow
And-
your own food.
Yeah, and I will see those of you in the viewing audience when I do the next episode.